and welcome to this very, very special edition of Community Conversations. This is your host, John Quinlan, and you got to pull the mic around, and my co-host, Wanda Smith. Hey, Wanda.
Good morning.
Making it in the fog this morning, all right?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
It was great. Yeah.
All right. We are just getting set up, but we are so excited by a series of 4 different hours that we're bringing you over the next couple of days. We're talking to the 4 challengers in the mayor's race. In just a moment, we're going to be in conversation with Mo Cheeks, and then later this morning with Toriana Petaway. Then tomorrow, we'll kick off the morning with Rod Shukla and wind things up with Satya Rhodes Conway, and we're hoping and continue discussions perhaps to bring Paul Soglin in the following week. So, very excited to have this prospect. But let's just plunge right in, because guest in studio, this is the first time I guess you've been in radio here. You've been on our TV studios a couple of times. This is Mo Cheeks. Hey, welcome.
Hey, thanks, John. Appreciate it. Yeah, this is the first time on radio.
So, given the week that we've had, I guess the most important question to get at right away is, what can the mayor do about the weather?
Yeah, right.
I'll have. I was just reading something about Ross Perot, so I feel like maybe I'll try to borrow his. What did he have? A voodoo stick?
Yeah, something like that.
Sorry, that's a weird introduction, you guys.
But hey, actually, an issue that I want to plunge into right away that my co-host feels deeply about, and I do too, because you know some of my circumstances, having kind of a tenuous housing situation, is the issue of housing.
Yeah.
And how this relates to economic issues and to gentrification, other things facing the city. But Wanda, can you help us plunge into that? Why is housing such an important issue for folks?
Wow. Amen. I tell you that I sit on the Housing Service Consortium Board of Directors for Dane County, and I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was this bad. And to see almost 1,000 people on the homeless waiting list is really disturbing. And not only that, to see such a racial disparity going on around the 18 housing programs that the Housing Consortium oversee. My biggest concern is, what is the strategic plan to fix this? I know we have all of these great ideas about how we're going to end homelessness, but I don't really see a concrete plan in place that, we could say, okay, this can go on, we can have meetings for the next 5 years, but people are dying, people are on the street, it's cold, homeless shelters are overflow, people are building their budgets off the backs of these homeless populations. So as the new mayor, the new Madison, what is your plan?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let me introduce myself a little bit to the audience. So my name is Mo Cheeks, and as you get ready to talk about housing, I think so much about the beauty of this city, right? So many folks like myself love this city and really cherish the fact that this is one of the best cities to live in, one of the best cities to raise a family, and yet we know we continue to live in this tale of two cities. We've been talking about this for generations, frankly, but I'm running for mayor of Madison to directly take on this persistent reputation that we've developed as a tale of two cities. This needs to be a place that is inclusive and innovative and safe for everyone who chooses to call this place home. And we know that plenty of folks are moving here or staying here for opportunity. And that's not just folks who move here for college. That's not just folks that move here for Epic. That's folks who are moving here because they're housing unstable, but they know that this is the type of community that ought to be, that aspires to be the sort of place that you can get your feet under you. So I've spent the past couple of years on the City County Homelessness Committee, and we've been talking about this at length, right? And what it really boils down to is we need to have a serious commitment to. So housing affects a couple things, right? So homelessness is impacted by a couple things. There isn't near enough places for people to literally just lay their head, right? When it's cold out like we saw this weekend, there's not near enough shelter. And so step one is, we need to have a serious commitment to ensuring there's enough shelter for men, women, and children, and families especially. And the next is, to your point, talking about that waiting list, right? It's hard. It's hard to wrap your head around the reality that there's a waiting list of some 1,000 people who are hoping to get stability. That needs to be our commitment for the homeless population, but frankly for the entire rest of the city as well. We don't have near enough housing in the city, and we haven't been committed to developing housing fast enough. We've allowed ourselves to get sort of backed into this corner of being a community that's rapidly growing, rapidly diversifying for a lot of the right reasons, but we haven't developed enough housing fast enough. And so as mayor, one of the things that I'm committed to is doubling our city's affordable housing fund, because we absolutely need to be investing significantly more into developing housing faster. And specifically, in addition to the sort of housing first strategy that we have to support a supportive affordable housing, I'm committed to expanding our workforce affordable housing, because there's way too many folks that even once you get sort of stable, you got a good job, you're trying to figure it out, working class families in Madison are struggling to be able to stay. And that's why we know, too many people that would like to live in Madison. Maybe they work in Madison, but they just based on the cost of housing are getting pushed out to just the surrounding communities. And, it's not a zero-sum game. I'm happy for people. We're sitting in Sun Prairie right now. I'm happy for people who choose to live in Sun Prairie, but to be priced out of Madison is unacceptable.
Well, one of the things that I think has sometimes been a criticism of the incumbent is an inability to collaborate, to whether that's with county government. It's kind of problematic that we have an executive who isn't necessarily able to work and play well with the county executive or the county board. Also, you mentioned neighboring municipalities. Issues like housing don't end at the city line. We really have to have some kind of a comprehensive regional approach. So we're gonna return to this issue because it is so vital and it is so essential to this whole issue of gentrification, economic justice, and other things. But could you just remark a little bit about how city and county can work together better on this issue moving forward?
So I represent the most diverse district in our city. I've been on the city council for the past 6 years, representing District 10 on the west side. It ranges from Nakoma to Allied Drive and everything in between, Midvale Heights, Orchard Ridge, Duns Marsh, and representing a district that abuts a whole nother city, right? Residents don't think of themselves as along city lines. That's not how we most people form identity. We're part of a community here, right? And so if you live, for many of my constituents who live on Allied Drive and might live on one side of the street or the other, they may or may not even know whether they live in Madison or Fitchburg.
Is there if they live in the town of Madison or the city of Madison?
Exactly. Well, we've that's become increasingly common that folks who live in the town of Madison may or may not know that they live in the town of Madison. I'm making a joke that anyway, it doesn't matter.
It's early in the morning. It's all right.
I know, right?
When we think about collaboration, I think we have to bring it back to people, right? Collaboration for collaboration's sake is worthwhile, but on the council, I have been, committed to working with my colleagues, hosting budget listening sessions outside of my district, working with my colleagues on the county board to collaborate on things like mental health crisis planning, and I think it's really important to recognize that when we talk about the future of this community, Madison is due to grow by another 60,000 people in the next 20 years, just Madison. But Dane County is going to something like double that.
Yeah.
And this isn't, like I said, it's not a zero-sum game. We're not, our community is going to be well served when we have a mayor that recognizes that it's to everyone's benefit that our community be growing, but also, in order for us to grow successfully, in order for us to grow strategically, we have to have strong relationships with surrounding municipalities and with the county executive. And as mayor, I'll be committed to that. Not only because that's smart, but because that's how we're going to do things like plan for effective, county-wide public health program. That's how we're going to plan for regional transportation planning. We have to be a community that works well.
So we need to bring it back to our incumbent mayor. Obviously, we want to spend the bulk of this hour you advancing what your positions are and how things would be different under Maurice Cheek's administration. But on the issue of housing, I think it's kind of, again, resonant and fundamental with folks that are concerned about the way that our incumbent mayor has been carrying himself. I mean, my experience of Paul Soglin, going back to 1978 when I moved here, 5 years after he first became mayor at the age of 27, is he was always great on housing issues. He saw that as something really important. In the mid-1980s, when I was the director of the Tenant Resource Center, served as chair of the MEOC Housing Committee and president of the Fair Housing Council, he was an ally. And he got a lot of this stuff. But in recent years, his statements have been positively incendiary, bringing up the worst stereotypes of who homeless people are, that somehow a problem that comes from outside the city, that folks just need to get their act together, and just things that, for me, as someone who lost my home to an unjust foreclosure several years ago, were roundly insulting. And then the issue was compounded in my case, in the case of many of us who objected to what he was saying and doing. They wouldn't return phone calls. They wouldn't be in dialogue with us about it. There's just something about this. And if folks on the silent side of things are listening, again, we have given you an opportunity. We'll give you an opportunity to air your side of this story. But, again, it comes back to it. We had a mayor who was doing really well on that, but not so much lately. When homelessness was proposed as a protected class, when I sat on the Equal Opportunities Commission, you all at the Common Council passed it, I think, virtually unanimously. And then
Absolutely.
Mayor Soglin tried to veto it, and then you overrode that veto.
Absolutely.
So, again, using this as a case in point, what is happening with our incumbent mayor and his attitude on some of these basic issues of economic justice?
To hear the emotion in your voice, it's really similar to the concern that I've heard from countless residents who have said, the episode that our community has gone through in recent years of having a mayor that seemingly is attacking the homeless population, of seemingly seeking to criminalize the act of being homeless, is unbecoming of the values of our community. And certainly the council has consistently, to your point, consistently tried to uphold the values of our community. And I have taken, it's hard not to take offense to having a mayor that a mayor has a really unique position. You have the sort of bully pulpit, and when you stand up and say you're speaking for the community while attacking the homeless population, it's hard not to take offense at that, right? And so countless folks, whether you've experienced homeless or not, don't want that to be sort of part of the story, part of the legacy, part of the sort of values that we're espousing today. And certainly that's part of why I'm running for mayor of Madison.
Each of you has had the opportunity now to be interviewed at length by Dean Moseman from the Wisconsin State Journal, who ironically was one of the reporters with Doug Erickson who wrote this landmark series on homelessness.
It was a great series.
But I think the point that was made in the article was Mary Berryman Agard made one side of the story in terms of who Paul Soglin is, that he is a compassionate person, he's a family man, he's deeply dedicated to the city. And when I write the book that I guess I've told you about, Voices of Conscience and Courage, he is one of my heroes. He's going to be there. But there is this other side of him that is often phrased in terms of temperament, that he's just kind of a gruff guy, or he's just very opinionated, or because he has been so around for so long that he thinks he knows the answers to everything and kind of second guesses those who don't. Temperament matters. That bully pulpit matters. The way that you communicate to the community matters. And Wanda, let me just bring you in briefly. You were just commenting last night on Facebook that, again, you felt like this is somebody who maybe got things before, but not so much lately.
Right, yeah. I think like the last, I worked in the Salvation Army. I say like the last 6 or 7 years, I've really felt the oppression of systemic racism for real as far as housing. But I think the biggest thing is that I think I've seen this mayor's tenure. He's done great things. I moved here 27 years ago. My kids were small. It was the best place to live. Now I have grandkids. It's the worst place. And when we talk about housing, we talk about that. If we know there's a great racial disparity overall, economic, housing, everything like that, right? But if we look at getting people in getting them to sustain housing, get this housing, affordable housing in place, right? Getting people stable. These black kids are going to excel. That is going to be the key.
So I'm going to give you a chance to reflect on that. But this, I guess the theme I want to develop, and we'll move into issues of substance in a moment, but the kind of leader that you are, the way that you project things, the way that you come across, whether you're open to listening to other viewpoints is really essential. And if anything, I've heard on your side, you're just too mellow and too too nice sometimes or whatever. There's someone who worked on Wanda's campaign who just was not kick-ass enough or whatever. But on the other hand, you got to be that. You got to have your feet in both a community like Allied, but also be able to communicate with leaders and lenders and folks that have resources in the community. So I guess where I'm going with this is what do you have to offer? What is your leadership style? What kind of a record do you have that shows that you're that kind of bridge builder?
So a few years back, the city's HR department asked me to offer, I think it was the keynote for the city's leadership development training. And it was a little bit unusual to ask an alder to do that, but as an executive in the technology industry, they knew that they were drawing on someone that had plenty of experience in leadership. And I spoke about servant leadership and the importance of being a leader who empowers those around you. That we've moved past a time when the great strength of an executive is to be able to wag their finger from on high and tell everyone what they need to do. I think the best executives in today's day and age are folks that recognize that information is democratized and communication is widely democratized, and so everyone who works for you has the opportunity to communicate and really is going to be either empowered or not based on your leadership style. And so it's been my priority in my professional life as well as on my tenure on the council to work closely and collaboratively, not only with my colleagues, but with my constituents, to bring folks to the table, to bring more people's voices to the table of decision making. That's my leadership style. That's what's going to be different in the future when I'm mayor is, so many folks right now don't believe that City Hall exists for their benefit, right? But on the council, I've already demonstrated, trust is such an important thing to be able to establish for communities, and particularly historically marginalized communities of color. We developed, one of the coolest parks in the city of Madison, the new Allied Park. Mm-hmm. But what's really important about that process isn't that we built a new park. I mean, that is important, but that we held several youth-led listening sessions, young black men and women who came to the table and interacted face-to-face with the Parks Department and planners and parks and said, this is what I want my community to look like and feel like and be. And they dreamed it up, and then they saw me deliver. They saw city government deliver for them in a way that they weren't quite sure whether or not that was even still possible anymore. That's, as I run for mayor of Madison, I'm running to expand what it looks like and what it feels like to be a Madisonian. I'm running to remind people what it'll be like when you have a leader that's listening, a leader that is bringing you to the table.
So while we're in the Allied neighborhood, of course, a place that both you and Wanda have done significant work, again, bridging that city of Madison, Fitchburg area. Something that happened last week was truly wonderful in the area of food justice. A new institution, a new place came into an area that since I think 2009 when Cub Foods closed across the way really hasn't had adequate groceries. What did that mean for that community, and how did we get there? How can we replicate examples like that again?
So that's such an awesome story.
So it's Luna's Grocery.
Luna's Grocery Store, yeah. So such an awesome story. Mariam and Joe there who live in the neighborhood. They live just across over in Fitchburg, live in the neighborhood and saw an opportunity to be a part of the solution, right? This is what I mean when we talk about, empowering residents to be part of the solution in our own communities. So in 2014, when Walgreens decided to close,
which really wasn't a very adequate.
Which was never an adequate grocery store, right?
But at least it was something.
A huge percentage of residents were getting their daily goods, overpriced as it was, getting their daily goods from Walgreens, and so it served as sort of a stopgap. When Walgreens closed, I authored and passed a resolution on the city council calling for us to have a 3-step plan for the future of that neighborhood, closing the food desert, planning for neighborhood space, sort of community center or economic center for that space, and 3, planning for economic growth and a transportation-oriented development plan for the future of that neighborhood. And it's taken years to get us to where we are today, but after investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into, at the time, what was the Allied Community Cooperatives plan for adding a grocery store to that neighborhood, we did. They did a market study that confirmed what we expected, which was there is room for a corner store, and particularly a diverse, ethnically unique grocery store, right, where people would be willing to drive sort of out of their way to come to the neighborhood to get some amenities that you might not otherwise be able to get at a generic grocery store. As they were sort of progressing along their plan, we had this really unique opportunity in that somebody outside of that cooperative said, you know what, we see an opening here. This building is going for sale. We're gonna move into this space, and this is Mariam and Joe, had family background in the grocery industry, and so they were able to pursue a healthy foods grant. And gosh, it was intense because it was the largest grant that our city was ever going to give. They were asking for some $140,000, and I had to, sit with them, make sure I understood their plan so that I could go to bat for them. And went to the grants committee, articulated from the Alder's perspective how critical this was going to be, not only to Allied but for closing food deserts for the future of our city, and then had to do the same thing when it came to council, continuing to go to bat for why should the city make the largest investment we've ever made into closing a food desert, because it's critical, because every neighborhood in our community deserves access to healthy food in proximity to where they live. And in Allied Drive specifically, this is one of the neighborhoods that's most dependent on public transportation, and having to take a bus to get to Woodman's or something like that is an unacceptable solution. So it's been awesome to be able to walk through this. Obviously, would have been even better to see it happen faster, but I think we've got exactly the right folks at the table. And over the past week, it's been amazing to see all the earned media that they've gotten. People know about Luna's. I stopped in this for the second or third time. I was in there this weekend, and it was hopping. Like on a Saturday afternoon, there's a bunch of people in there, a bunch of folks I knew.
People come out enjoying the nice weather, but they decided this was really important.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, so I just came back from Detroit, and seeing what's happened there in neighborhoods that were devastated, disempowered, food. Community gardens, bringing in grocery stores, it's just essential to that. So just to reinforce that point. But the other thing off of this, you're talking about that tale of two cities. And what's so frustrating sometimes is when folks in so-called majority culture, well-off folks, generally people who aren't people of color, just don't get the struggles, the nature of it. They maybe sometimes stigmatize and blame folks for being poor, for struggling. That's really difficult. But on the other side of that, Madison is a very generous place, and a place that wants to shoot for a different standard. And what was so encouraging is I think folks have come from all over town to support Luna's Grocery.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And so anyway, but when we started talking 2.5 years ago about things, there's this dichotomy that there are so many great things, so much potential here. It's why you and Melissa have decided to come to town to raise
Melissa,
your kids. Yeah. But on the other hand, there's real profound struggles. And, Wanda and I have been talking about this over 3 months now on the radio. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen here, but a lot of denial that gets in the way. How do you rationalize that? I was contemplating not moving back here because of some of these hypocrisies and other things, this state of denial that is Madison. But clearly you see both sides of that. Just the last thought is in Dean Mosman's article on Paul Soglin. I think his immediate response is there are just too many people who are complaining and accentuating the negative, and Madison has a lot to offer here. And I don't mean to mimic him, but I that kind of attitude sometimes gets in the way of saying if you love this place, you want to make it better. How do you make it better? How do you wrestle with this dichotomy here? Isn't it really? Is it a false dichotomy?
So a couple of years ago, I decided to reach into the university and try to find folks that were interested in making this place better. We have, in fact, this was during Dean's previous reporting when he was doing the stories on homelessness. I brought in some interns from the Mortgage Center. Folks who, I brought in some students who were in Kathy Kramer's class in the Mortgage Center and said, why don't you come intern with City Council, with City Hall? There's so much genius in the university, but you guys are learning about this city through this really unique prism of, being students, and then you're learning about it through what people talk about in the paper. One of the most amazing things to me was seeing young people who really took personal responsibility to say, you know what, I've got a lot of privilege going in my life, but if there's issues of lack of access to voting or lack of access to homes, this is what I want to work on. And I think for the talk of complaining, like, this is a city of doers. Like, we have the reason why we have some of the highest nonprofits per capita is because Madison is a place where people want to roll up their sleeves and be a part of the solution. What we're looking for, what the city has been looking for some time, is leadership to say, you know what? It is what we say it is, right? Yeah. This place is a tale of two cities, and in order for that to not be true, we have to be able to say it out loud and then determine to solve it. We have to be able to accept that it requires a level of discontentedness with the present day, and that doesn't. We had a long conversation about this in a meet and greet that I had yesterday as part of the campaign trail, and folks are so fired up to say, you know what, I do love this city, and maybe I don't have this. This is a really mixed crowd, and so some of the folks are coming from near West Side, sort of privileged living experience, and some of the folks were lived here for 2 generations on the South, 3 generations on the South Side, and we really got into it. Right, that's exactly the sort of experience that we need to be having more of. Is folks who can come to the table together and say, you know what, I don't think I see the world. I don't think I've had the same world experiences that you have in this city.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to grant that what you're saying is true. Your truth is true. And let's work together. Let's figure out how we can make this city live up to our values as a progressive place. I think that's a much more constructive path forward than complaining about the data or arguing over people's realities.
And it doesn't diminish the fact that we made Madison, we've been made Money Magazine covers, and we are one of the most great places for seniors to live, or all the other accolades that we've had. We are also way out of proportion in terms of the incarceration of people of color. We are often, in every decade, there's someone who steps forward and says, racism is a problem other places, but not here. I mean, we can recognize both of those realities and still move forward. And Wanda, so I'm going to just pivot to you. And actually, I will note that we are halfway through this hour. I know it's going to go quickly. I also want to give an invitation to our listeners to give us a call if you have comments or questions. 608-825-0930. Please be patient with me. I'm solo engineering today. I'll get you on the air as soon as we can. 608-825-0930. Wanda, so you've noted in the past there's a special power in this guy who you got to know, who supported your own race for Alder early on. You're also talking about potentially having the first man of color as the mayor of Madison. What does all that mean to you?
It means a lot because I think that we know the record. I mean, people think I say that there's a great racial disparity. No, everybody knows that Wisconsin has the worst racial disparities across the country. We know that. And I think having a black male in position, I think it'll help lift the city as a whole, because it's the black man that has been really oppressed here, and so I'm excited about all of this new leadership that's going to take place on the council. Some seats are going to expire. Amen. We're going to get some new leadership. We're going to get a new Madison. We're going to get a new vision. And we have to make sure that everybody is inclusive. Not the half and the have-nots. We all shall have. People always talk about, this is February.
Black History
Month. Yes, thank you. The thing about it is this. Yeah, Martin Luther King had a dream, but 50 years later, it should be a reality. God, we're still, reading the dream. No, let the dream become a reality these days.
So I want to make sure you have a chance to actually get into some
Yes.
of the specifics of your policy stance. But what Wanda's invoking, I think, is central. You remember Dr. King's Riverside Church speech, probably, where he essentially, he was people trying to pigeonhole him. They were trying to say, you're a black civil rights leader. What are you doing talking about peace? What are you doing talking about economic justice? These marches that occurred that Dr. King led were really for all of us in the area of economic justice. Unfortunately, the money went into the Vietnam War, meant that we couldn't address poverty in a meaningful way in this country. But I know you don't. You of course you realize the historic significance of potentially being the first African American man to be the mayor of Madison. But you also don't want to be pigeonholed. There's a broader set of issues here. This is something that has meaning for everyone. So I mean, can you channel your inner Dr. King and explain to us how that all plays out?
Well, I'm not going to make any effort to channel Dr. King. There's one and only there. As someone. Here's a story I haven't told very often. So I used to tutor in the schools. I remember I had, I would show up twice a week at Memorial High School and was tutoring largely algebra, but a variety of subjects. And I remember one day as I came in, some students who didn't know who I was, I walked in a suit because I was, going in before I was getting ready to go to work, and some students said, this was 2000, I don't know, maybe five, no, this would have been 2011 or something. Young man said, who is that? Do you think he works at the White House? And the idea that they saw a black man in a suit and suddenly conjured up a vision of the first black president. And they thought, maybe this guy is in some affiliation with that guy. They wouldn't have thought that just a few years before, right? In fact, it would have never crossed their mind until just a few years before. And so I certainly recognize the historic importance of being able to step into that office and expand people's view of civic life, of who gets to contribute, who gets to lead.
You were a young man who got to see this state senator who was appearing at a rally. I think that you remarked on this. So tell us that story if you could. Who was that state senator, Mo?
So I was when I was in college. So when I was in college, I had a professor one day who came to me, John, you know this story because I've talked to you about it before, but I had a professor who came to me and said, hey, are you going to come hear our senator speak today? I was at Eastern Illinois University. I think this was 2005 or 2006. I was going to school to be a teacher, actually. I was going to school to be a high school computer business teacher. And the professor said, come see our senator. And I, had to sort of bashfully, candidly admit, I don't even know who our senator is. Like, I'm not engaged in politics like that. Who's our senator? He said, well, his name is Barack Obama, and some people think that he'll be the first black president. You should have seen my face, John. It sounded like the suggestion that we were going to have a black president seemed so foreign to me. But I was intrigued, and so I went. And, that afternoon, we're standing in a room of 200, maybe 300 people. And, I think everybody probably has some memory of the first time they heard of Barack Obama or saw him speak or met him or whatever the case may be for people. But this was my first time in a situation like this. at all. So I see this man standing up in front of me, talking about some of the most pressing issues facing my generation. He's talking about the student debt crisis and the effect that that's going to have on our economy. He's talking about Wanda said amen. He's talking about climate change and the effect that that's going to have on our world. And he's talking about the wars that we're in and the need that we're going to have to get out of them. But all along the way, he keeps bringing it back to this idea that I can't do this by myself as a politician. And what was really interesting to me in that moment is I realized that this man was driven by values to be a public servant. See, I was going to school to be a teacher because I wanted to be a public servant. And being a teacher was really the best conception that I knew of for that. As a young man growing up in a very blue-collar neighborhood, I had only seen a handful of jobs, and teachers were the coolest, most important sort of community servants that I had seen.
Your dad was working class, a truck driver?
Yeah, he's a construction worker.
Excuse me.
No. I mean, he drives a truck for Ozinga, pouring concrete. Union worker, teamster. So I see this man standing in front, and he is demonstrating in leadership in a way that I've never seen before. Right? I've never been in a room with a politician in my life. I had never seen a black politician before, and it was that day that Barack Obama expanded for me what it meant to be an American, and certainly expanded for me what I imagined I might be able to contribute to civic life.
Yeah.
And so, as I get ready to run, as I'm running for mayor, and as I think about the opportunity to be of service to this community, one of the things I know I'm going to get back to is tutoring in our schools. I miss tutoring in the schools, but I know it's going to mean something for those young people to see me in the schools. And frankly, I think it's critical that the mayor have an ear to the ground of what the next generation is seeing and feeling and experiencing and hoping for and fearing. And so, I'm excited to be able to step into this historic moment.
Want to reissue that invitation. 608-825-0930 is our studio line. I think if you had phoned when I first issued that invitation, it might have run into voicemail. That's turned off now. You should be able to join us if you like. People are still getting used to the idea of the call-in show, so we may or may not have many folks take advantage of that today. But if you would like to phone in your comments, your questions, whether you happen to be a supporter of Mo and you'd like to tell us why that's the case, or whether you are still trying to make a decision and need some clarification on some of the issues facing us in this mayor's debate, give us a call, 608-825-0930. Wanda, as you hear Mo talk about that, can you think about your own kids, your grandkids? What's it going to mean if you have somebody who looks like you leading our city?
Yeah, but I think like the most amazing part of Mo is that his wife he has a Caucasian wife, mm-hmm. right? So the beauty of it is he has a love for all people, right? So that's going to be so powerful, because then it's going to be a mayor that's going to represent all the people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not just have a lens just for one, protective class of people. So that's what's going to be so amazing about this candidate.
And we're going to try not to wax quite so poetic and philosophical here and get into substantial things. But one is bringing up something, of course, that is also something that President Obama shared. He was part of a biracial family. Increasingly, we don't fit neatly into boxes, our families. Mm-hmm. But do you draw inspiration from that part of his story, that part of his journey?
We don't have enough time to get into the nuance of a biracial identity, but undoubtedly, I mean, we live in a rapidly growing, rapidly diversifying community where what it means to be a Madisonian means a lot to a lot of different folks, whether you are white or black or Latinx or Native or Hmong. There are any number of lived experiences that folks are going to have in this community. And, what I'm what I'm hopeful for, if you haven't spent, talking maybe to the audience now, but if you haven't spent time in our schools, I challenge you to, because this is where you get to start to see what the next generation of this community is going to look like. Our schools are minority at this stage. Something like 54% of our schools are non-white already. This creates a brilliant opportunity for our community as we continue to grow, and frankly, a really interesting challenge. Our community is more diverse than it's ever been, and that diversity is exploding. And so, I start to get into that in the opportunity agenda that I lay out on my website at mocheeks.com. How critical it's going to be for us as we plan for the future of our economy, the future of public safety in this community, the future of housing, the future of education, to be a city that is creating upward mobility for everyone and leveraging the prosperity that we're seeing here for all folks.
So what I was digging through my briefcase, which I don't apparently have, but the Northside News featured a Q&A with all the candidates.
Mm-hmm.
The North Side, where I made my home for about 15 years, is typical. That future, you're envisioning a more diverse community. One of the things that has brought that community together has been the North Side Planning Council.
Mm-hmm.
I had an opportunity 10 years ago to do a documentary about it, which is pretty remarkable to see how people from each of these individual 16 or so neighborhoods had come together under one umbrella to work together. The same thing happens in the context South Metropolitan Planning Council. So whether it's planning councils or other things, how do we build on that neighborhood strength that begins in a smaller neighborhood but then links neighborhoods to each other?
So this is one of the central challenges of our times, is to be able to, as we continue to grow, is to be able to directly address the sort of growing inequality in our community and the growing disconnectedness and fragmentedness of our community. And I think, in order to address it, in my experience, it starts with being able to set a table that people trust is an authentic table where their voices are going to be heard, and then being able to deliver on the results that people are asking for. We talked earlier about young people being at the table in my district to help build a park. This was addressing a concern that folks didn't believe government was here to listen to. Right? I remember one of the first experiences I had on the city council was one where it must have been the first few weeks that I was on the council. This is 6 years ago now, and I got a call from some parents who said, we're being told that the Route 18 bus through Allied is going to get removed. And, they say it's because of Verona Road construction. There's nothing we can do. But, this is how our kids get to and from school. There's the 18 and the 19 that go through the neighborhood, but they're different, and they're different times, and they're different routes. And they said, this is how our kids, go to school. This is how they get home from after-school activities. This is how we get to the grocery store. To remove one bus is going to drastically impact our community.
Take those buses. I know exactly what you're talking
right.
about.
Yeah, one goes around Red Arrow and the other doesn't, right? And so I had to, go to the table and sit with that committee. And I was brand new to the council. I was probably a little intimidated. I didn't even know that council members were de facto members of every committee, that I could just sit and be a part of the discussion. But as I came to the table and brought their voice to that table, argued for the importance of keeping that route. We have, as I said, a caring community. Folks on the committee saw the importance of, continuing to support this neighborhood at the same level that we had, with the same level of bus service that we had. And so they decided to side with the community instead of sort of the more efficient, maybe, planning process that staff had brought forward. And so we kept that bus. But the most important thing there was this was about people, right? So you bring it back. I call one of the mothers afterwards and said, "Hey, we're going to keep your bus." And I remember this night perfectly. It was raining. I was just outside of the city county building, and the Capitol dome was all lit up. And I'm just on the phone talking to this mother. She starts crying. she said, "You don't understand how impactful this is to my community, to my family, and to my kid. Like, you just saved our life." And it feels like hyperbole, right? But it feels so real in the moment that constituents, residents, community have a need to know that their voices are being carried through City Hall, and to be able to bring community together, whether it's on the north side or on the west side or on the south side or in Darbo or on the isthmus. Like, folks need to know that they're being represented, and not just folks who are the most who are constantly heard. In order for our community to be a more inclusive, more innovative, more safe place, we need to be a place of shared identity where we have shared purpose, where we know that we're going forward because our voices, our dreams for a future that's going to be stronger for the next community, for the next generation, are being carried forward. And that's why, as we get ready to invest in more affordable housing, it's critical that we're listening to all voices as we get ready to invest in, public transportation that serves our community more broadly, that serves more of our residents, that's faster and more efficient to get people access to jobs, access to food. It's important that the mayor is bringing more voices to the table. That's what I seek to do as mayor.
Mocheeks.com is the place we can find out. We're going to be offering similar resources for all four of the candidates who can be appearing over the next couple of days, but that's where you can get some of the very specific things. And before we close out the hour, we're at our 15-minute warning mark here. We'll give you a chance to expand on maybe perhaps the three most important issues and policy statements. One just last general theme I want to bring up. I've told you, a good friend of mine is Napoleon Smith, former city council chair, resident of now, I think, the 13th. Anyway, he's Southsider, been there a long time. I was telling him about who you were. We were reflecting on some of the other candidates right now. Napoleon's a wonderful guy, but he's a bit of a curmudgeon at times. He will ask, he's kind of skeptical about who will make a good mayor because he's been around a long time. He has criteria. One of his concerns is that the mayor be a good manager. Mm-hmm. And he was arguing, to play devil's advocate, maybe alders don't necessarily get that aspect of things. The kind of liaisons that you form with community groups, with other things, are really vitally important. But a mayor at base has to be a manager. Each of those deputy mayors have to be doing their job, overseeing different departments on a day-to-day, whether it's flooding or some kind of another crisis that's facing. You got to be able to run the city well. Mm-hmm. What skills and experiences do you have to bring to bear on that aspect of the job?
Yeah, I think you do have to be able to run the city well. I mean, it starts with an understanding of the players, not only within City Hall, but across the community, knowing, having served on the City Council for the past 6 years, and having navigated a lot of sort of tough negotiations, whether it's directly with staff or with developers or with police or whatever the case may be. Those experiences are critical, and I think my background as an executive in the software industry is not only critical as I bring to bear the experience of leadership, but it's critical as we think about the future of our economy, as a place that is going to continue to grow in high-skilled work. Having an understanding of the future of our economy and sort of how critical it is that we continue to grow in the sort of high-tech, biotech, health tech spaces, that's going to be paramount. And so, in my work, whether it's managing people or managing relationships across the globe with other partners and competitors, certainly not at all new to leadership or management.
The incumbent mayor, undeniably, since 1973, 22 years in office, has a lot of experience. So at a moment like this summer with the flooding, or recently with all the weather and anticipating as the snow melts, got to clear those sewer grates, got to get things ready. He's really good at that. He really does understand. He does know how to rally things. But sometimes he maintains that he's perhaps the only one who can do this job. How do you answer something like that?
Yeah, I think the mayor did come out on the second day of the flooding. I think having a mayor that is present and committed to this city is critical. That's where we start, right? As one of the things I'm, when I talk about tutoring in the schools, I think that's in stark contrast to the idea of prioritizing the level of travel and commute that our current mayor sees as an important priority for himself. The work of mayor is one of leadership. It's also one of collaboration.
Yeah.
And in order to meet the needs of our community in this moment in time, you have to be excellent at both. And I think what our community is longing for in this moment in time, and what I hear constantly is a need for consistent leadership, of present leadership, and a true spirit of collaboration. And as I have been building this campaign, as I've been running for mayor since July, that's a huge part of the feedback that I get from folks, is folks who say, I want to be on this team because I know that when you talk about an inclusive, innovative, safe city, you're already modeling that in the campaign as an inclusive, innovative, safe campaign, a safe space for people to be able to engage in, regardless of your background or your age, an innovative campaign to be able to bring ideas to the table, and a place where all folks are welcome. And so we have a moment in time in this city where we have. As I said, a growing and diversifying community. We get into this a lot in the opportunity agenda that I lay out on mocheeks.com. But, the mayor needs to be someone who has a strong relationship with the schools and is an advocate for the next generation of our community. It's a huge opportunity for us I should say it's a huge missed opportunity right now that we don't have a mayor that has a voice on education issues, a voice on the schools. And as someone who has been an advocate for our schools, who's been an advocate, not only on the board of the Foundation for Madison Public Schools, but even before that, tutoring in our schools, as our community gets ready to, we're probably going to go to referendum in the next couple of years. To try to stay competitive. Our facilities for our schools are getting outpaced by some of our surrounding communities, and as industry is growing, as business leaders are trying to recruit people to move to Madison, that's what a common question that people are getting is like, hey, I'm reading mixed things about the schools. I want to understand, is this a place where I want to send my kids?
It strikes me that other cities have a better partnership with the schools. Sometimes we're very much in silos here. I mean, it's not that there isn't important stuff. I don't mean to discount it. But it just seems like that's an area there's all kinds of potential that hasn't been realized.
Undoubtedly, right? So, I mean, there's an opportunity for the city to play a role in ensuring that, as we build new facilities, that these facilities are going to, particularly, if we're talking about neighborhood schools, making sure that they're neighborhood facilities that have, if childcare is necessary, as, an adjacent offering, or daycare, or public health clinics, like, a neighborhood school is going to bring more offerings than just the regular school day.
Wanda, there was a document you gave me about housing, but that related it to education. You got to have a good education so you can afford the jobs. I mean, so you can get the jobs that will allow for the housing, and then housing segregation is often a function related to the schools.
And not only that, though, having all this police in the schools, that's traumatizing. How can we excel? How can our black kids excel when we see police walking around with guns?
Police community relations. Mo, can you?
Yeah, let me dive into that. I've been a leader on public safety related issues on the council. This has been a major priority for me, so much so that a few years ago, my colleague Matt Fair and I, in conjunction with Michael Johnson and a few other community leaders, developed the 15-point plan, as it is called, to lead an effort to help our community transition from thinking about public safety in a historic sense to thinking about the need for us to have a proactive public safety agenda. One of the things that was part of that agenda was peer support and reentry support services, recognizing that a huge preponderance of violence and crime that exists in our community is happening by a relatively small group of folks. Then this is, repeat offenders that are not being supported or rehabilitated at all by the criminal justice system. That as a community, if we want to be a safe place, we have to be investing in ensuring that folks, after they've paid their debt to society, have the support systems to be able to deal with the trauma of having all the trauma associated with their life at that stage. And so this has been tremendously successful. This is, part of a larger continuum, but this has been so successful that the council decided to double the funding for it this past year because we're seeing results already. In order for our community to be a safe place. And listen, we can never let crime and violence take a foothold in this city, and everyone, of course, deserves to feel safe, whether that's at school or in their neighborhood, but we have to have a mayor that's moving us to proactive violence prevention.
This is hard to parse out, but Wanda, something you try to articulate is when folks live in communities of color, low-income communities, the very circumstances sometimes contribute to their participation in crime. I mean, you articulate this really well, but it is all interconnected if we get at some of the underlying inequities.
Right. If we know that poverty, crime, and violence go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
As a mayor, if we begin to start putting more funding into these communities of color, our crime rate is going to go down. That's the bottom line. People
Absolutely.
are without. If they
Absolutely.
don't have jobs, they're going to go steal, they're going to rob, they're going to do things to provide for their families. So there has to be all these barriers that are set up in this state to oppress the black man or the black family or the black kids. That has to change. We have to change that narrative all around.
And we talk about this, like I said, on the opportunity agenda on the website. But one of the ways that I'm trying to think differently about what it looks like and it feels like to be a young person in this community is through a bold initiative that I'm leading to invest to create a college savings account for every kindergartner on the first day of school, to raise the bar for our community, recognizing that there's great research out there that shows that a kid with a college savings account, regardless of their background, is 3 times more likely to go to college and 4 times more likely to graduate from college. And through partnership with the city and the school district and the private sector, now keep in mind, we've got funding already identified. Private sector is going to fund these continuing education, savings accounts. We can change. And we have to change the expectation that we're setting for young people in this community. That's the sort of city that I want to lead. That's the sort of city that I want to raise my kids in. One where we're demonstrating that we believe in these kids.
Mocheeks.com, again, is a place we can get further details on all this. As we close out the hour, because Toriana Petaway is waiting in the wings here, I want to zero in on what I guess I'm hearing are some of the concerns being expressed perhaps by people who are my age or in older generations. We live in a very, very challenging time. And so I think folks are seeking stability. They're seeking solace in terms of knowing that the person who leads our city, our state, our country has what it takes in terms of the bank of experience that's necessary. So for folks who are looking at the 4 of you as challengers, how do you answer? Well, Paul Soglin has done this for most of his adult life. He's really good at it. He really knows the city. He knows the institutions. He's well connected. And at this time of uncertainty, why would we want to change? How do you answer and reassure folks who are concerned that if we bring someone in who is just starting this job for the first time, that you in particular have what it takes to be able to assume that mantle of leadership?
In November, our community made it very clear that we were looking for progress, and my background as an alder on the city council for the past 6 years, representing a microcosm of our city, my background as a minority business leader and an executive in the technology space, and my background as an advocate for our kids and a tutor in our schools, all uniquely positions me to be able to do one of the most critical roles of mayor, which is being able to bridge the gap between the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit community, the education community, and lead us forward in a critical time for the future of our city. And this is personal for me. As a father, I am committed to raising my kids in a city that is growing, more inclusive, more innovative, and more safe. And the fact that we've been backsliding on this is unacceptable. And that's why we need new leadership in this moment in time.
All right. Hey, Mo Cheeks, thanks so much for joining us. In retrospect, if we do this again 4 years from now, we're going to need to give each of you a full 2 hours because there's so much more to talk about. But you, regardless of where the path leads you, and we wish you well, we hope you come back and be in conversation with us again. Thanks so much.
Thank you.